Informatics India Limited, Bengaluru, heads of all Somaya institutions, guests, and all the participants. I, Mrs. Gauri Gothivrekar, librarian, KJ Somaya IT College, Sion, welcome you all for this inaugural function. Diyas symbolize goodness and purity, and lighting them denotes dispelling darkness and going into light. On this note, I request the dignitaries to proceed for lamp lighting. I request all to raise for the Somaya campus prayer. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Ishavasyamidam sarvam Yatkim cha jagatyam jagat Tena tyaktena bhunjitha Ma grudakasya svidanam Mukam karoti vachalam Pangum langhayate girim Yat krupatamaham vande Paramananda madhavam Om Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Bhirvajinivati Dhinam Avitravatu Om Chodayitri Sundrutanam Chetanti Sumatinam Yajnam Dadhe Saraswati Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kashchid Dukhamapnuyat Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Now I invite Dr. Hindura Vaidande, Emeritus Professor and University Librarian, for the welcome address.
Good evening to all. On behalf of Library Technology Conclave, we welcome you all. Respected Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Pillai Sir, respected Dr. Ajit Kambavi, Principal Investigator, Pune Knowledge Cluster, and former Director, IUCA. Respected, this is Dr. Jagdish Arora. He is the advisor for NBA Board of the Accreditation, New Delhi. CMD of Informatics, Dr. Satyanarayana. The Program Director of this, our LTC 2022, Professor Shalini Ars Madam. Today's resource person, Professor Robin Rice from the Syracuse University, Edinburgh University. Then this is Professor Kevin from the Syracuse University. All the members of the organizing committee, faculty members of the Somaya Vidya Vihar, librarians, participants, we welcome you all for this 3 days international event of LTC 2022. The theme of this function itself is research data management and stewardship building blocks of open science. And everybody must be aware of that. We had this first curtain raiser program on the 7th January this 2022 at the Bangalore. We had our second curtain raiser program at the Somaya Vidya Vihar on the 3rd March 2022. And now we are having 3 days. This is the international event of the LTC 2022. So on this occasion, the dignitaries on dais and all the participants, I welcome you all. Now, we are having the 3 days program. Today we have the tutorial. Also, tomorrow we are having the panel discussions, and then we have the special lecture tomorrow. Afterwards, then day after, on the 30th, we are having again the panel discussion, and then we are having the validity function. So there are 6 sessions where we have called the immediate persons in the, not only librarians, but the persons, those who are in the research data management all over the globe, we have called them. Also, I welcome the participant online, those who are registered, and online they are registered and they are connected to this international event. I welcome all of them also on this event. So this is the such type of research data management. We thought that this is a new subject. Now not only the librarians, but all the data research people also. And only we are aware of that collecting data and then compiling data. But the research data management is a new term where that this expert and then eminent people in this academia, they will also guide to us. On this occasion, I welcome you all for this today's session. Thank you. So again, we wanted to mention about this Somaya Vidya Vihar University and Somaya Vidya Vihar. This is the Somaya Vidya Vihar campus was founded in the year 1959 by the late Padma Bhushan Sri K.J. Somaya, 1902 to 1999. In the 5 decades, it has grown in the large educational complex with the 34 institutions catering diverse fields of education such as humanities, engineering, education, medicine, management, pure sciences, mass communication, with more than 4,000 students and the more than 4,000 faculty 40,000 students and more than 4,000 faculty members, staff, and along with the 65 acres. There are various constituent academic institutions functioning under the Somaya Vidya Vihar University, such as the K.J. Somaya Institute of Management, Research, the Somaya Institute of the Engineering, then Sports Academy, Department of Library and Information Science, then Education, and so on. Many they are available. It was founded on the belief that the education is an important pillar of the nation, building with the power to change life. The education must involve to encourage the holistic development of the youth. It is known as much for its science, technology, engineering, management, social science, and commerce program, etc. So this is the organization now we are having in the campus, and apart from that also we are having the central university library also we are functioning from the engineering college. In the campus also we are having all the institutions, they are having their rich collection, libraries they have been developed. Each organization is having their librarian and their collection. Now now we are having the hub and spoke model we are following here. So this is just the brief about the Somaya Vidya Vihar and Somaya Vidya Vihar University. Thank you.
Now I invite Professor Shalini Aras, Founder Chairperson, Myra School of Business, Mysore, and our conclave chair to brief about the conclave. Over to Madam, please.
Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. As program chair, it's my privilege to extend a very warm welcome to each one of you, and especially our guests here today, particularly for this function, Professor Ajit Kembavi, who, even though it is a cliche to use that, who needs no introduction to the field of science, technology, and including information science. In fact, we couldn't have found a better person to give a keynote for this conference than Professor Ajit Kembavi, because he is not only a great astronomer, a scientist, but as you know, astronomy is a field which is primarily data intensive. Before they coined the term data intensive science or e-science. In fact, if you look at the history of e-science, you would go back to how data is important for discovery and how data storage and then reuse is also credited to Tycho Brahe, who was an assistant to actually Boyle, who developed the, he used the astronomical data that was available, Kepler's, and then Kepler used the astronomical data collected by Brahe and then developed the theory. The point here is the importance of data and discovery was probably first evidenced in the field of astronomy, and we couldn't have found a better person to talk about or give a keynote on this subject here today. I'm sure he's going to talk about all about astronomy and how it has been a data-intensive science even before the term data-intensive science was coined. So a very warm welcome to you, Professor Ajit Kembavi, for this, and we are privileged to have you to give the keynote for our LTC 2022 conclave on research data management and stewardship, building blocks for open science. We are also privileged to have Dr. Jagdish Arora, who again is very familiar to the library and information science profession as well as the academics, particularly in India, because he headed the InflibNet, Information and Library Network, which is a UGC inter-university center, and he led the, I would say, from the front, many of the initiatives that InflibNet undertook during his tenure, and a special mention must be made of several repositories that he created. So he certainly knows the tough job of creating a repository, data repository or records repository, and also developing a framework for it. So we are indeed privileged to have you, Dr. Jagdish Arora, to inaugurate this conclave. And we began today's conclave, as is the norm with many of the conferences, with two tutorials. And we have with us today the resource persons who are responsible for this tutorial. I'm sure the participants here would agree with me that they were privileged to have, in a sense, a RDM 101 course in a day through our resource persons, Dr. Robin Rice, and also Professor Kevin Croston here. Welcome to you again, once again. Thank you for accepting our invitation and being here, Robin and Kevin. Thank you. And of course, there are other resource persons, panelists, keynote speakers who are here. Well, I would be actually intruding upon the whole program if I go on listing all of them, because you have had an opportunity to look at the people who are going to be there tomorrow and day after on the screen. So in a sense, my job is now reduced because we have seen the program schedule. But let me just take a minute or maybe few minutes of you to give you an overview of how we got here for the LTC 2022 in the sense of as far as the program is concerned. As I mentioned earlier, the theme of this conclave is research data management and stewardship, building blocks for open science. So how did we get here to this topic is interesting in one sense, primarily because we had last year LTC 2021 on the theme of e-science and digital libraries, building communities for collaboration. In a sense, that theme led to the current theme of RDM and stewardship for building blocks for open science. Because this library technology conclave, to go back to the series that we are talking about, is primarily a platform that has been conceived by informatics, especially CMD Satyanarayana, to bring together these two or three things or two or three forces that actually shape the library as well as the, I would say, research and education field. Because the alliance between scholarship, science, and libraries is millennia old. If you go back to the earliest libraries, whether it is the Alexandrian library or our own Nalanda Takshila libraries, they were all created or evolved primarily to support scholarship and scholars. They were the place for scholars to come together and also for storing the knowledge created by the scholars. That is scholarship, in other words. So the alliance between scholarship, scholars, and libraries is millennia old. And in one sense, I would say open science, whether you go back to science or go back to scholarship, there is this intimate connection or alliance between libraries and scholarship. What is the other one here? The technology part. But as you know, technology has always been supporting both scholarship, or behind every scholarship and behind every library movement also, there is the technology. Whether you look at the contemporary technologies of clay tablets of 1500 BC or the computer tablets of today or the 21st century, you will find that these technologies have always been behind this task of archiving, communicating knowledge between scientists, between scholars. So that is the alliance, that is the theme of LTC, Library Technology Conclave. There is the scholarship, technology, and libraries. And as I said earlier, the LTC 2022 on open science and RDM is a continuum in that sense, because science and scholarship and libraries and technologies have always been together, have worked together. And our objective here is to strengthen that in the context of the latest, you can call it the big thing, that is the open science. If you look at open science, there are various connotations. The connotations vary, but the underlying principle or philosophy behind open science is that everything should be open, including, but particularly, the knowledge created, whether it is the publications, the data, the software, or including simulations or even physical samples. All of that should be available openly as much as possible so that it could advance science, it would help society. That is the premise on which this open science construct is built. In one sense, even though, as I said, it is millennia old, this connection between science, scholarship, etc. If you look at only open science itself, the term open science was coined by Shubin, Darrell Shubin, in the year 1985, when he wrote an essay on closed and open science, trade-offs in a democracy. That was in the year 1985. So as per the record, that is the first time that the term open science was used. And in fact, Shubin was actually revisiting the concept, particularly what is known as the Mertonian paradigm, or you can call it as the doctrine of Republic of Science, revisiting his essay or his work, because Robert K. Merton's KUDOS, that is the acronym KUDOS, which stands for communism and I mean, I will not explain because all of that is here. I will not take much of your time to explain what does kudo stand for, universalism, disinterested, because these are considered as the tenets of science. So Shubin was actually revisiting that to consider, and then he came up with this idea of extending that for open science, or with the concept of open science. But then that was in the year 1985. So for about 70s, 80s, 90s, this idea of open science was there, but not, I would say, rigorously discussed or even debated, because sporadically here and there people were mentioning this term open science. But there were other forces that led to the current situation that we are in, wherein open science has become a movement. Today we can say open science is a movement, and we have got here to this open science movement through various paths. One of them is through sciences, which I said some of these people were already advocating for openness in science. Some people even trace the origin of open science to the origin of modern sciences, or the emergence of modern science itself, and then the scientific journal, because until the scientific journal, the first scientific journal of 1665, the philosophical transactions of the Royal Society was actually developed, or rather I would say invented, in quotes. Until then, science communication was primarily a kind of a secret one, in the sense between scientists through anagrams they would actually communicate. With the scientific journal, well, it became more open. So some people even trace the origin of open science to scientific journal itself. What I'm trying to tell you here is to give you an overview of these kinds of forces. The emergence of scientific journal in 1665 is one such milestone if you want to go back there, or if you want to use the term open science, then we go to 1985 and Daryl Shubin used this term. Or if you look at it from another perspective, the other path that led to this movement was primarily because, as I already mentioned, technology has always been not only supporting but also shaping the trend or shaping the path of science as well. So one such technology was the internet. So in the 1990s, when the internet emerged, so then people started saying that, I mean, people also got used to free and open information, easily accessible free and open information. So that led to the open access movement, with which many of you are familiar with. So open access movement, the Berlin Declaration, all of that, led to the open access movement. So in one sense, that is another path that led us to the open science movement that we are in today. Then the other part, the open science itself has many principles. In fact, the 6 principles are considered as part of the open science. One of them is open source movement, or open source software. So open source software was also happening on the other side. That led us to this. Then open methodologies, that is from the research method side, there was this movement towards making research more transparent, methodologies more transparent. So from the point of methodology, from the point of software, that is open source software, and then there was, of course, this open data movement also added, and then open access movement. Then, of course, in general, the open, or OER as they are called, as open educational resources. So these were the 6 principles that actually considered as part of open science. And we have arrived at this stage of open science movement as a confluence of all these different movements. Open access, open science includes open access. So basically the idea is to open everything from that of research methods, data, to this. So that is how we got here to this stage of open science. And then there were many countries, and it started with institutions, and then to countries, started mandating or bringing out laws to develop some kind of a framework for this open science. And then it was found that each country, each institution was having its own framework, and that is why in 2019, UNESCO was tasked with this assignment or job of developing a universal framework for open science. And as all of you know, and as we have given here in the program guide, this task was completed, and in November 2021, the UNESCO framework or UNESCO Open Science Guidelines were adopted and signed by all the 193 countries. So that is how we have got to the stage wherein globally you have some kind of an open science framework that propels this movement forward in a hopefully more unified, more coordinated manner. And that is one of the reasons why we decided to have this theme as the theme for LTC 2022, because it's now time. And as far as India goes, in India too, there was another particular document, I would say, or development, that is the STIP, Science, Technology, Innovation Policy of the Government of India. The draft one was released in December 2021, which also clearly at least makes a mission statement of open science, including research data management. So that is the reasoning and logic behind choosing this theme of research data management and stewardship, building blocks of open science. The reason is that it is time for us to come together. It's time for us to understand the benefits as well as some of the concerns of both the scientists as well as others, and then discuss and take it forward and start the conversation. That is the primary objective of this conclave, LTC 2022. That is, let us start the conversation, let us strengthen the movement of open science, particularly through research data management. And we also, coming from the library information science field, we believe that this is one frontier that in India too, because we have, I mean, as you have seen, surveys have indicated that we have not yet taken some definitive steps as far as the library profession is concerned towards this end. So that is the, as I said earlier, that is how this theme of research data management and its stewardship, because stewardship is important. Libraries have been the stewards, have always been the custodians of publications. Now it is time for us to be the custodians of, or look at how we can be custodians of research data as well. So that is the theme of this conclave. And naturally we have, I mean, as you have already seen and as Vaidende also has mentioned, as I mentioned, we began with 2 tutorials, and we had, the participants had, and now a flavor of what is RDM, how they can contribute, etc. to the tutorial. And tomorrow onwards, we are going to have 6 thematic sessions, each one of them trying to look at one important aspect. We begin with the first session is about open science, frameworks and open data, which sets the, probably, hopefully, the idea behind the open science, what we can do towards it, and particularly the policy frameworks, etc. The second session is about infrastructure for RDM. What kind of infrastructures are required, what is already developed, and how we can contribute to the RDM. So like this, there are 6 sessions. I will not take much of your time, and then I will conclude with this, saying that this is the theme, and then let us start the conversation. I request each of the participants and the stakeholders here, scientists as well as the library information science people, all stakeholders, to start the conversation about RDM, stewardship, and open science, and take it forward. That's from me about the theme as well as the LTC 2022. As you already know, this is the 6th in the conclave series, and LTC has always been, as I mentioned earlier, been focusing on technology for science, scholarship, education, etc., as you see, based on the various themes of LTC. So thank you so much. Once again, welcome to conclave, and start the conversation.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for putting light on the theme. Now I invite Mr. N.V. Satyanarayana, Chairman and Managing Director, Informatics India Limited, Bangalore, to elaborate more about Informatics Group. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, friends. My hearty welcome to all of you for this inaugural function of the Library Technology Conclave 2022. Professor Pillai, the distinguished scholar and a highly accomplished national leader in higher education and research, who is the Vice Chancellor of this university. Professor Ajit Kembavi,
40 years ago,
whom I may call as the architect of the leading library consortium in India, the one you know started by InflibNet, which is now called eShow Sindhu. From the beginning, from day one of the consortium was conceived, he was involved driving and directing this consortium to where it is today as a very successful service to the whole country in the academic and research sector. And Dr. Jagdish Arora, whom all of you know here, most of you at least, who took InflibNet to the next level and completely transformed it from library-centric services to scholarship-centric, a lot of research information-centric services, and even moving InflibNet's activity to the next level of ranking research output of the country. And Dr. Shalini Aras, the program chair of this conclave, who has put in a very rich content, very relevant for all of you to, as a take home. And Dr. Hindura Vaidande, Emeritus Professor in the university here, Somaya University, and also the University Librarian. Once again, I welcome you all to this event jointly organized by Informatics, our company, and Somaya Vidyavihar University here in Mumbai. At the very outset, I would like to thank the Somaya Vidyavihar University, and in particular Professor Pillai, whom I have known since his days for several years as professor in MG University, Kottayam, and later who achieved the highest level as the chairman of UGC. So thank you, sir, and your university librarian, Professor Vaidande, for this excellent partnership which has led us today to organize this event. About informatics, 2 years ago we completed 40 years. When I look back, when we started, it was a time where there was no internet. So we always pride ourselves as a pre-internet online company. When there was an internet before, there was online before internet. Those pre-internet period was one phase of our activity using the currently available online technology and whatever emerging digital technology. We were driving the market in India in that phase of about 15 years, starting from 1980. And internet became a strong driving force for our very business, and the technology internet started driving us in our second phase, which continues to drive our business as much as everybody's life today, with endless opportunity for companies like ours. In fact, when we organized on the completion of 10th year of informatics, when we instituted an annual lecture series on informatics, we invited Dr. Sheshgiri, who was then the Director General of National Informatics Center, I still remember what he said. That was the time when information technology revolution was happening. And he, in his annual lecture, he said, we are witnessing two revolutions, IT and BT, and the future is in LT, he said, library technology revolution. And certainly it seems so in the coming days and coming years when we talk about library technology revolution for changing not just the information, but not just the libraries, but what the libraries service that is providing information. In effect, it will be a kind of another kind of information revolution driven by technology. That's what he meant that time. So with this, in this period, we have come out with many product services. It was an exciting time for us and continues to be a very exciting time with very many growth opportunities, as I said. And I can put our achievements in the past and where we are heading in about a 3 minutes video about informatics. And I request one of my colleagues to present it before you to give you a glimpse of informatics yesterday and today.
40 years ago, when information was scarce and online was unheard of, informatics was envisioned with a digital vision by an entrepreneur working as a librarian then to bridge the global information access gap in the country. This pioneering vision is a global company today with products and services benefiting millions of users in the academic, research, and corporate segments around the world. India Today magazine described the venture as the first online information company in India for global knowledge access. Serving global information companies on a project for supplying consolidated Indian business information helped Informatics to ideate its first digital information product named India Business Insight (IBI). Credited with the enviable reputation as the pioneers in the online and CD-ROM-based information business in India, Informatics started creating new digital information products through 1990s. Neuromed on CD, a product initiative funded by NIMHANS Bangalore, was the earliest e-journal archive in India for Indian medical journals. Driven by the internet advantage, Informatics developed its first global information product named JGate. JGate is truly the world's largest database for journal literature by its coverage of over 50,000 journals. The journey has continued with a diverse portfolio of products and services evolving across 4 business units: information products, digital library solutions, enterprise content management and publishing. The product family of Informatics is a growing list with innovation driven by the latest in technology and evolving market needs. In an industry where content is the king and technology is the master, Informatics has been a proud pioneer and leading player. Gaining 40 years of insightful experience by 2020, Informatics continues to be driven by values with a passion to deliver excellence.
Thank you. As you have witnessed the digital revolution happening in India in all spheres, even the digital library revolution is happening on a larger scale at a social level, with many digital library projects happening in the country, particularly with smart city projects taking off in the country in many states. I'm happy to say here at this point that we have been in the leading front in implementing several digital library solutions in smart cities and large organizations like in Tumkur Smart City, Lucknow Smart City now, and several other ones where some of them like Tumkur Smart City won series of awards, and in the Ministry of Science and Ministry of Earth Sciences, where we developed a KM solution with a strong digital library solution in the back end, which also won several awards in the recent past. So the journey continues, and at this point, I would also like to mention the motivation behind starting the Library Technology Conclave, which is 6th in the series. In the beginning, I mentioned, reminded by what Dr. Sheshgiri said years ago. All of us know and agree that while libraries are a strong civilizational support for caring and storing and managing the scholarship for perpetuity, perpetually for posterity, the very shape of libraries from what it was centuries ago and today is completely changing, driven completely by technology. Beginning, if you go back to Gutenberg's period, the invention of paper, a technology product, invention of ink, the technology product, and now in the last, at least the beginning with the middle of the last century and today, the transformation is happening on a very on a scale which none of us even ever imagined about 25, 30 years ago. It's happening because of technology, and we don't even know what new shape it will take in the coming years. So the library as a strong civilizational force for, as I said, the caring and managing the knowledge of the civilization of today and tomorrow is going to be continuously transformed by the emerging technologies. So this makes it imperative for us to be constantly in touch with technologies relevant to the libraries. And libraries, I must say, have been in the forefront of implementing technologies in the campuses, as most of us know, that the library management system, a fully automated library management system, what you call end-to-end library management system, was implemented in the campuses long before the campuses went completely automated. So libraries have been in the forefront, so that gives an impetus and motivation for us to carry this. As you are all aware, we had a series of programs as part of our academic support activity. Right since beginning, as many of you know, we organized the first international conference in 1993. We called it Infotex. That was again driven by the technology, the whole technology of those days, and that we organized for the Society for Information Science in India at that time, and continued with that. In 2001, we partnered with the University of Mysore, where Professor Shalni took the lead in organizing Asian Digital Library Conference, where we played a major role as organizing partners. Following that, in 2000, in fact, in between, the first first conference on digital libraries in 1996 was organized by us at a national level. And in 2005, we organized InfoVision as a mark of our completing 25 years, which was later handed over to an academic institution at that time. And we also used to have e-content annual series for a couple of years as our roadshow. And in 2016, we started LTC as an annual event in the last 6 years, which we hope to continue as the company's flagship brand, as a social activity to the information science community, When I say social activity, I must say here, while in conducting conferences, one can make money. This is a conference where we don't want to plan to make any money. We provide certain support and then leave it to the partner organization to conduct as a conference activity. We bring in program support and initial seed funding and a significant fund for that. And following that, we leave it to the organizations with one motive that fine, if there is any surplus, it is for the organization and not for us, for the company. We will continue with that motto in all our future library technology conclave. Friends, with this, I once again invite all of you and also request you to support our Library Technology Conclave 2023, which will be announced in the valedictory function. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Today we have Dr. Jagdish Arora as guest with us. Dr. Jagdish Arora is a very familiar name for library professionals. Professor Shalini and Mr. Satyanarayana has already given very nice introduction about him. So now I invite Dr. Jagdish Arora, Advisor, National Board of Accreditation, New Delhi, and former Director, InfluNet, for the inaugural address. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you. Respected Professor Rajshekharan Pillai, Dr. Professor Kembhavi, Dr. Satyanarayana, Professor Shalini Ers, Dr. Vaidande. First of all, I'd like to put on record that I did achieve a lot at InfluNet, but the guiding force has always been Professor Kembhavi. Besides all other his activity, he was also the founder for UGC Infonet Digital Library Consortium, and he in a way handed over the platter to me and guided us at every stage of development. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Kembhavi here. The topic of this year's Library Technology Conclave is data management and building block for open science. Jnanam Param Dhyaya. Jnanam Param Dhyaya is a shloka in Sanskrit, which means that knowledge creation and dissemination is the ultimate objective, which means that the tenets of open science is already built in to our DNA, the Indian DNA. Shalini has already explained as to what open science is and what it constitutes. So I would just like to mention that various movements such as open access, open data, open source software, as well as citizen-centric science movements have sought to address different facets of these crises in science. The open science movement consolidates all these movements and focuses on creation of an ecosystem which is designed to foster production of science in a ubiquitous manner and access the information sources on knowledge and prioritization of research and innovation based on social needs. Open science is characterized by inclusiveness, collaboration, and universal access. Let's look at open science ecosystem that exists in India. The open science movement is gaining momentum, not only in India, but in different parts of the world. There are a number of facets to open science in India that are active and kicking. However, a concrete and holistic approach to create a strong and sustainable open science movement requires policy interventions at the government level. Moreover, the Ministry of Education has already announced that they'll be setting up a National Research Foundation, NRF, with a seed grant of 500 crores to bolster the country's research output. The National Research Foundation, in addition to its own seed grant, will leverage more resources from industry to support 500 collaborative research programs between Indian institutions such as IITs, NITs, ICERs, and reputed universities abroad. The ministry is also funding projects called Indian Research Information Network System, IRNS. Many of you might have adopted it in your libraries, which would kind of make a network of active scientists and promote collaborative research. So example of various facets of open science movement in India. Open access is one of the movement. We in India have about 563 open access journals. In fact, the directory of open access journals has listed 563, then it has now come down to about 350 journals because there are a lot of predatory journals in India. So they're trying to cut down on predatory journals. And of course, the number of journals that are published from India are reducing in open access directory. There are about 105 institution repositories from India. And I must say that National Digital Library, IIT Kharagpur, is playing a pivotal role in promoting, setting up of institution repository. So open access movement is doing very well. As far as policies are concerned, there are a number of policies, open access policies that are available. Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, has an open access mandate. Department of Biotechnology and Department of Science and Technology have also have an open access policy. 2014 they've came up with that. Indian Council of Agriculture Research has an open access policy, and there is a Delhi Declaration on open access. So coming to open data, Ministry of Science and Technology launched the National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy in 2012. Besides, Department of Biotechnology has also come up with a draft policy on biological data storage, access, and storage policies, and they have invited comments from the public to develop the policy formally. There are a number of open access data repositories that are available. One of them is Open Government Data, Open Data by Sikkim government. ICSSR Social Science Data Services. This is a repository that contains ASI and ISO data. And of course, it was set up by Implement Center for ICSSR as one of the projects. And all those ASI and ISO data are now available openly to every citizen of the country. Open Government Initiatives for India, it's NIC, it's by Center for Public Policy, Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. National Data Repository, a project of Directorate General of Hydrocarbon, Ministry of Petroleum. Central Identities Data Repository, CD, which is basically Aadhaar. Then National Population Register. Then constituency level election archive. So these are some of the open data repositories. Open education resources. India is very proactively contributing to open education resources with funding from Ministry of Education under their National Mission of Education through Information Technology, NMEICT. And of course, the repository that are available include NPTEL, EPG Pathshala, Vidyamitra, Swayam Prabha, National Repository of Open Education Resources, Karnataka Open Education Resources, Open Education Resource for Schools, and Open Source Courseware Animation Repository. So OSCAR, there's a lot of contents are available, and Swayam is continuously adding more content in open education system. Coming to open source software, the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, Government of India, launched a formal policy on adoption of open source software for Government of India in the year 2014. A growing number of government agencies and software companies in India are moving away from using proprietary software towards open source software. The proliferation of OSS in India has led to development of various forms of technological dialogues and the creation of universally accessible resources that are developed by communities for the benefit of society. So open learning licenses, Creative Commons have been adopted by Ministry of Education for all their resources. Then there is open initiatives, people science citizen networks, where are the number of organizations, NGOs and others like Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad. Then there are initiatives like Himachal Gyan Vigyan, Delhi Science Forum. They all make a network of promoting science education in India, and they're working very actively. So finally, I would like to say that with flux of new information technology in libraries, the role of libraries are changing, and librarians are required to take up new roles and new responsibility. Data management is one of such opportunities that libraries can focus on. Libraries have already set up institution repository and promoting open access journals. Participants would be learning nuances of data management and data sciences during this workshop, as well as pre-conclave workshop that several of you might have attended. I'm sure participants will have a lot of knowledge on data management to carry home and implement in their respective organization. My best wishes to the organizers and participants for success of 6th Library Technology Conclave. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are fortunate to have Dr. Ajit Kembhavi, sir, as keynote speaker. Dr. Kembhavi, sir, has played a very significant role in the development of astronomy as a research area in India. He also conceived and executed the InfoNet project under the University Grants Commission, which brought the benefits of information and communication technology to all universities in India, including enabling electronic access to thousands of journals. Sir is a well-known science popularizer, has given several public talks and presentations for promoting astronomy among the masses. He has also written a Marathi book, Nabhat Hasare Tare, co-authored by Jayant and Mangala Narayikar. So with this brief introduction, I request Kembhavi sir for the keynote address.
Yes, thank you very much for it. And I thank Satyanarayana and Professor Pillai for inviting me to this meeting. This is not the first time that I'm attending a meeting in the series. I've been going to several of them, and I have had the good fortune to be able to give talks at many of them. So I was pleasantly surprised when Satya again called me just several days ago. Okay, just several days ago to give this talk. One result is that not all of my numbers in the talk are completely current. Some of them are a few years old. So if you had given me one more week's notice, then all of them would have been completely correct. So now everybody expects me to give a talk on astronomy, and I'll include a little bit of astronomy in my thing. But if you look at the title of my talk, it says there are two examples of research data management. So one is astronomy and the other is the pandemic. Okay, so we are all still living through the pandemic. So the number of people wearing masks here is much smaller than it used to be in the past. And then, but that does not mean that the pandemic has gone away. It could rear its head again any day, so we'll have to be still careful. So you may ask me, what is my qualification for talking about data on the pandemic? And I'll come to that as I go along. So my intention in combining these two data streams, astronomy and the pandemic, is to show how different it can be to gather one kind of data from another kind of data, and still the underlying principles remain the same. Right? So when it comes to data, you see that the number of people in the world is 7 billion. The number of astronomers, for example, is about 14,000. Right? So which means that however much data we generate, it is the data generated by the normal person which dominates the world of data. And then there has been a particular explosion since we talk about data in social media. And so you have here, the 350 GB data generated per minute in all the in the videos which are uploaded onto the YouTube. Then 4 billion Google searches and 6 billion text messages sent every day worldwide, which is about around 450 GB of data. Right, so at one time, when I first started working in data, I had a disk which had 26 megabytes in it, and another disk which was spare with another 26 megabytes. So here you're talking of 450 GB of data from just text messages. So we live in a completely different world. Right, so if you add all this together, then you've got about 2.5 exabytes of data generated per day. That's a very, very large quantity of data. Right, so then data comes from completely unexpected sources. And much of the big data is actually generated, for example, in grocery retail. So when you go to a shop, and you don't have to go to the US for that now, just think of big basket. Right, so all of us now order things from big basket, but they have to make sure of what is available, what is not available, forecast demands. And then in an economy like the US, a developed economy, the responsibility is much greater because you have all the holiday periods, you've got the Christmas shopping, and we're going to take into account all that, right, and all the fresh vegetables. So this kind of normal human activity, which is completely indispensable, and astronomy is a dispensable science. This kind of normal human activity is an indispensable science. So that is where the important data is being generated. And then you see that as you go to more complex activities, the data becomes more complex. I don't have time to go into it. And this is the data which is projected. I mean, I couldn't project it to 2022 now. And so you see that there's very, very large quantities of data that we're going to deal with. So I'm going to, but not talk about this most interesting data that I have mentioned here. But I'm going to go into two data domains. And it's already been mentioned by the eminent people who spoke before me, is that astronomical data is the most ancient of data. And that's simply because you look up at the sky, you see the stars there, you see the galaxy, and then the planets moving around, and then you begin to wonder about them and you begin to gather data. Astronomy is always is a science of big data. Right? It does not matter. Kepler was mentioned at Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe collected the data, and Kepler used it to establish the shape of the orbit of Mars. And so at that time, the data would have been just on several, it was not clear to me, sheets of paper probably, sheets of paper were available at that time. And then the data was on those, and Kepler worked on that. It was very large amount of data because it had to be handled, and even simple mathematical things had to be invented to handle the data. So which means that if you have got pioneering data, you always end up doing pioneering work. But also you need to use pioneering methods. Right, so when astronomy has progressed a great deal from Kepler's time, and we are talking of very large numbers here. So if you look like galaxies, we live in a galaxy has got 10 raised to 11 stars in it. But how many galaxies are there in the universe? So our universe could be infinitely large. But it turns out, because it takes time for light to reach from distant objects to us, we are talking about a universe of 10 raised to 11 galaxies, out of which we have already recorded about 100 million galaxies and studied in detail 1 million galaxies. So which means that much of the universe remains to be explored. The same is with stars. Every galaxy has 10 to the 10, 10 to the 11 stars. You're talking of 10 to the 21 stars. And then when you come to the planets, you see that I was asked, when I used to be a student, I was to question how many planets are there. I used to say 9 planets. We had demoted one of them, and we got 8 planets. Right? And that's all that we knew. And then finally, in 1995, the technology enabled us to discover at last a planet which is outside the solar system. And since then, technology has taken us much further. We have about 10,000 such planets. Okay, and then and these are very rich planets. They are completely different types from what we had expected. And there are many, many planets which are Earth-like. Okay, meaning that we expect the conditions on them to be the same as the conditions on the Earth. And therefore, we expect that there will be living beings there, advanced living beings there. right? And how many planets do we know? 10 to the 4. How many planets are there? 10 to the 21. Right, so which means that much of the universe remains to be explored. And then, so therefore, we need a lot of data. And how do we obtain this data? So typically, you build a telescope. Right, the Galileo used the first telescope. And then he made the most amazing discoveries 400 years ago. He discovered the spots of the sun, which meant that the sun was not perfect. He discovered the moons of Jupiter, which were going around Jupiter, which meant not everything went around us. And then he discovered the stars in the Milky Way. Right, so absolutely great observations done with a 1-inch telescope. So then now we are talking about bigger telescopes. You can make a very big telescope and just look at one object in the sky, or what you could object by object in the sky, or what you could do is to have a survey telescope. So here you have got the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which has been going on for about 20 years. And here you build a telescope and you scan the whole sky. Not the entire sky, because you can't reach the whole sky from any point on Earth, only about half the sky. You go on scanning the sky and collecting data on objects. So, so you see, I'm sorry, yes, part of it is a thing. And so this is a small telescope, 2.5 meters in diameter. The biggest telescopes that we have are more than 10 meters in diameter. And then you see how many objects does it have? This is a little bit outdated, let's say 4 or 5 years outdated, so the number of objects has gone up now. So 933, close to 1 billion objects are there, individual objects. And then all the data on all these objects is available. It's available for the asking. So it's meaning that you could sit anywhere in India. You could sit in Mumbai here, or you could be in Assam, or you could be in Tamil Nadu. And then you can access all the data which is freely available. So which means that, in a sense, anybody here, anywhere in India, could carry out the same research as anybody else in the world. Okay, so astronomy is essentially a science of open data. It has always been like that. There are some proprietary parts to it. Okay, meaning that people who build telescopes have some privileges for a couple of years. People who think of new ideas will have their data locked in for a couple of years, but after that the data becomes completely open. So now, when I've got a survey like this and there's so much more data, what more can I ask for? So the idea then is that I build a bigger telescope. So however big is the telescope which exists at any point, you always want a bigger telescope because you want to look further and look for faint objects. So now here is another telescope called the Subaru telescope. This is a Japanese telescope located in Hawaii. The previous telescope was 2.5 meters, this is 8.2 meters. So astronomical terms, this becomes a much bigger telescope. It has got complex instrumentation and it gathers more and more data. So when I talk of data in astronomy, what do I mean by that? It's mainly images. People are familiar with images. But we also have spectrum which is coming from the objects. And then there are catalogs, meaning that when you have this information about billions of objects, then we have got data pipelines which automatically generate catalogs. Right? So you cannot just plain paper catalogs. You can look at it, you can say these are the properties of the objects. So then we want a bigger telescope. We have done all that. Now here, so you can see the difference between a smaller telescope and a bigger telescope. On the left is you have got the SDSS images, which has generated thousands and thousands of research papers. And on the right, you see that exactly the same field, exactly the same objects, but you see that there are more objects, and that every object you can see greater detail because the resolution is higher, and also the telescope being bigger, and because the exposures are longer, it looks deeper into the sky. Now, what are the facilities which are available in India for these kind of observations? So you have got AstroSat, which is a satellite. The satellite is a platform located in space from which we carry out X-ray observations, ultraviolet and optical observations. Then we have got the Aditya L1 mission, which is going to be launched later this year to observe the sun. And then we have, in the future, we'll have the 30-meter telescope, in which India is a partner. It's going to be located in Hawaii, and it's an international project. And then we have got the LIGO India project to detect gravitational waves, so which is awaiting final approval from the government of India. And then we have got the square kilometer array being built. In half of it will be in Australia and half of it will be in South Africa. But India is again an important partner in this venture. So when you look at AstroSat, it's there up in space. It was launched in 2016. It was expected that it will be active for 5 years, but it's going on very well now and has some more lifetime left. Now, it observes, it is in space because you want to detect X-rays and ultraviolet radiation being emitted by objects, which you can't do from the surface of the Earth because absorbed by the atmosphere. So all that I want to show you here, in order to contrast it with the COVID data, is the data pipeline. Because ISRO has launched a satellite and ISRO collects the raw data from the satellite, so which passes through several automatic pipelines until it is processed, and the data is finally delivered in a form which a researcher can use. Okay, and then the data is archived. Right, so which means that a researcher with limited knowledge of AstroSat, but who wants to carry out research in astronomy, in X-ray astronomy, can do that using this kind of a pipeline. So you have these pipelines working with all the major telescopes, and the pipelines deliver the image data, the spectroscopic data, and the catalogs, so which you can freely use. So here you've got about 200 terabytes of data of all kinds, which is being generated per year. These are all these telescopes which I mentioned. These are one-time telescopes. I mean, you can go to an object and you can spot it. But the most wonderful information in astronomy comes from objects which are varying. And they could be either pulsating stars, or they could be binaries which are going around each other, or they could be, if you're lucky enough, you'll see an exploding star which goes into a supernova. And therefore you need a different kind of telescope here, a different kind of survey, so which is known as a, so here I got, for example, the Zwicky transient facility run by Caltech, and Professor Srinivas Kulkarni is leading that effort there. And so what happens here is that you go to one part of the sky, you take a large area of the sky, and then you keep observing it again and again and again. So the idea is that you see the changes taking place in the sky. So you've got varying objects, you've got new objects which are coming up, and the most wonderful results can be obtained from them. Right? So then you've got this facility for rapid follow-up. So let us suppose that you see a variable object, a new variable object, which comes up in the Zwicky transient facility. Then instantaneously the information is conveyed to a whole network of telescopes, which are known as the growth network, and one of which is located in Ladakh here in India. And then these are not very large telescopes, but what they do is that they can go on observing that variable thing that you have found. And the idea of having these telescopes all over the world is that, which means that you can observe this object for 24 hours with no interruption. See, because that becomes extremely important scientifically, is to observe an object without interruption. And that is achieved by this. So the moment a new object is discovered, within seconds, these other telescopes can keep observing it. And I would like to contrast that with what happened some years ago, when a phenomenon called a gamma ray burst was discovered by one of the American satellites. So they thought that they had spotted a thermonuclear test being carried out by the Russians in the atmosphere. And it took a long time to establish that it was actually a cosmic event. It had nothing to do with Russians or anybody else. The point is that even if you suspected that some such explosion had gone off, it used to take 6 months to retrieve the data. And by 6 months, that object will be dead, because it has got a lifetime of just a few days. And now the new technology, as I said, permits you to point your telescope anywhere in the world within a few seconds to spot an object. So that is what comes out of new technology. And then if you want to extend this further, then you come to what is called, it used to be called the LSST, but now called the Vera Rubin Observatory in the US. And there, you've got a large telescope, which is 8.4 meter telescope. It is not yet online. It's going to come online in shortly. And then it goes on observing the sky again and again and again. So each part of the sky, they're accessible to it, will be visited 1,000 times in 10 years. So what I'm doing here is to take you, I'm taking you So development of telescope technology to gather the data and how the data is kept and how the data is distributed. Right? So, so then using all this data painlessly requires what is known as a virtual observatory. So where you'll have the telescopes anywhere in the world and where you've got the users anywhere in the world, and the users can use a concept like the virtual observatory and other similar concepts to very painlessly reach the data, find the data, to reach it, to retrieve it, and to analyze it. So this has been taken quite far by astronomers. Right, so then how do we use these large data sets? So we want to find patterns, we want to find correlations, classes, outliers. And what is very important for this is data analytics. Right, so you need domain knowledge, you need mathematics, and you need statistics for doing all the data analysis. And then you use visualization, you use data mining. And most importantly, in astronomy now, you need to use artificial intelligence because the data is simply too much to be faced by a human being. Right? So now, having set the stage here for the second part of my talk, I'll go to the data on COVID-19. Now again, COVID-19 data is being gathered all over the world, and you can easily access the data. There's so many centers within the US, in Europe, in Britain, from which you can get much of the world's data about the COVID. But I'm going to talk about zooming in on the data. Okay, meaning that not to get the big picture, how many people have infected all over the world, how many people have died all over the world, but to get the picture for just one city, and that is the city of Pune. And go deep into the data, meaning just all kinds of data. Because you see, when the whole thing started in early 2020, we had no idea about what it was. We had no idea about what is going to happen, how long it is going to last. And then people started getting affected dreadfully. People started dying. And nothing was known. There was no treatment available. There were no vaccines available. And so there was a mighty international effort. People tried very hard to try to understand the disease, and then the data was being gathered. You have to develop a vaccine. And it typically takes you 9 years or more to develop a vaccine, to test it, and to declare that it is safe, and to develop protocols for its use. So here we had to do it in months rather than in years. And that was a really great heroic effort. Right, so now, the data that I'm talking about, these are the people who have led the gathering of the data for the city of Pune, but some of the work at least is being done in conjunction with other cities. So where do I come into the picture? And why am I talking about this data, having spent my life with astronomical data, is that now I am part of a project which is known as the Pune Knowledge Cluster, so which was set up by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, and there are 5 other such clusters in the country now. And then the aim of all these clusters, but particularly our cluster, is to bring together all the academic institutions, R&D labs, as well as industries in the city, to work for betterment of the city, meaning take up projects which could benefit the city. So the kind of focus areas that we work on in Pune are health, environment and sustainability, sustainable mobility, big data and AI, and capacity building. So we conduct all kinds of courses. The courses can be for high school students, high school teachers, and they can be for expert people in different fields. And then we take up projects in environment. And even before our activity started in August 2020, but even before we started our activity, COVID had struck. Right, so Professor Shashidhara and others in the city, so they set up a COVID task group, and Professor Vijayaraghavan, who was then the PSA, gave all encouragement and all help for it. A task group was set up to carry out different kinds of works which are related to COVID data, not only COVID data, but the COVID disease. But what I'm going to concentrate on the data part of it. Right, so the kind of COVID projects that we have been working on all through the last 2 years, during which the pandemic has raged, is on this. The first one was called a sero survey. So meaning that how many people in the city of Pune have actually been affected by the disease? Because as you know, you can become ill, you can become seriously ill, or you could simply be completely asymptomatic. You don't know that you have been affected. No one knows you have been affected, but you are going around the city infecting your relatives and friends and anybody else who comes in contact with you, which is why we are all wearing masks, which is why we keep washing our hands all the time. Right? So what is the prevalence of the disease? And then the genomic surveillance. So we know that there are different kinds of variations. What kind of variants are present in the city, in a particular population? And the changing pattern of the disease is because there has been a new variant of concern. And for that, you have to actually take the genome and sequence it all the time. Okay, then environmental surveillance. So meaning that, can I survey the environment to say that the disease is there before I can see it in a sufficient number of individuals? Right, so for example, you look at wastewater. So the idea is to gather wastewater and then to test it for the presence of the COVID thing there, and if it is there, to sequence it to see what kind of variant it is. And that way one could set up an early alarm even before a large number of people get infected. Okay, then the data collection and analysis. Then long-term immunogenicity studies, meaning that you inject a person with the vaccine. What is going to happen over 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 5 years? Okay, then creating a clinical database. So these are the different steps that we have followed here. I mean, I'll not, it's too small to see. So slightly magnified here. Unfortunately, I can't read it from the screen, or not can I read it from my computer. But you see that there are different activities that are being carried out, and then they're all data-related activities which I'm talking here, and which allow you to gather the data, to curate the data, and to try to understand the data. And that is the main thing which I'm going to refer to. And here we have these magnificent telescopes which are collecting data for astronomers. And there's automatic pipelines which process the data and then made it available. But let us see how difficult it is to look at COVID data. So when people used to talk of epidemiological data, I knew nothing about it. And you say, why do you need such large projects? Why do you need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to gather it? And why does it take so much time? And I'm going to give you a small, short glimpse into where the difficulties lie. Right, so here, there are different aspects of the data which are there, and which start with gathering the data, and then what is happening immediately. For example, what is the case fatality? How many people die? Then what are the infection ratios? And how does the transmission occur? Right, and then we need to do the modeling, meaning that we need to tell people, as to if a new wave is starting, we need to say how fast will that wave progress, how many people you expect to be hospitalized, how many of those may need a ventilator, and how many of them may die. Because you need these numbers, because you have seen these very gory pictures of corpses lying in hospitals because you did not know how to dispose of them. Right? So every one of these datums is extremely important. And it is not the kind of data which can wait. I mean, astronomical data can wait. This data can't wait because it's a question of life and death. So, so what are the different kinds of data that we have? So first of all, the simplest data is what is called the daily COVID data for the city. Okay, you see that the first date there is sometime in April 2020. So that is when the Pune Municipal Corporation, who has been partnering with us very well, actually have started giving us the data. So you see that the number of people infected, you can see in the first row, I can't read it from here, but it's quite small there. And that was the total number of people infected in the city. Okay, but this data goes on and on. And so you see here is that this is the data on 1st April 2022. And then you see by then, 45,046,000 tests had been conducted, okay, to try to detect people in the, to try to see how many people in the city have been infected. And then you see that the total number of people who have been detected positive so far in Pune until the 1st of April, but the number has not really changed after that, is 661,000 people. 6,61,000 people have been infected in Pune. But this looks like very simple data. But you see that this data is coming from multiple sources. Okay, even though it is just the city, the Pune Municipal Corporation area, there are any number of hospitals, any number of things, and then all the data has to be gathered together, and then it has to be compiled, and then a number has to be put out in the evening on that day. It's an extremely difficult job. And then you must have heard that very distinguished people from different professions all over the world have been saying that everywhere in the world, the number of deaths have been vastly under-reported. And that is because it is so difficult to even gather information about the deaths. Right? So we have been working on this data for a long time now. And then now slightly more complicated data, which is that much more difficult to gather, and which is the data on patient data, individual patients. And those names have been removed from here. So this is what is called, it is called anonymized data. And then you see that for each patient, we have to know male, female, what is the age, and then where did they come from, the address of the patient. Okay, and then when were they admitted to the hospital, how long were they there, and did they become better and go home, or did they die? And what kind of treatment were they given? Were they given a ventilator or not? What happened? This kind of data is incredibly difficult to gather. Because just imagine a large public hospital, and hundreds of people are coming in there to be treated. The people are lying on the floors there. You don't even know their names. And then all of that has to be gathered together. So we developed apps which people could use for that, which are sometimes effective, sometimes not effective. But then we had to depend upon people actually going to the hospital and collecting this data. So we set up a large group of people who could do that. And then finally, when the data actually comes in, there are amazing discrepancies in it. So data curation becomes an extremely important problem. So for example, a male can be put as female because not all names are completely distinguishable as male and female. You ask people for their phone number, they give you a wrong phone number because they don't want you to call them afterwards because you don't know what's going to happen to you. Okay, then the address. So it'll be behind Lotus Cinema. Okay, so now the postman can find it, the rickshawala can find it, but we want a geo-information system to be able to find it. Right, so geo-tagging, that is incredibly difficult with data like this. Right, so there's a Professor Joy Mervyn Montero in ICER, and he has been curating this data with one or two people, and it is really difficult. And then I asked him yesterday, what are the most difficult parts? Even the year and the date and the month can be transposed. Right, so everything that can go wrong does go wrong. So this is a magnificent example of data curation. But then the most difficult data. Right, you see something here on the board. What is it? Okay, so these are case papers. So if you are admitted to the hospital, there are these papers next to your bed on the table. And the doctors keep coming and making entry on that. Okay, and that entry can be made in very absurd way. It is practically indecipherable by people who don't have the expertise. And if you present this to an AI person and say that, can you devise an AI way of reading this data, they just burst into tears. Okay? So this is simply not what can be done by technology now. So how do we address this kind of data? So again, there are people called interns. They are interns because our budget allows us to employ interns. But some of the interns can be 55 years old. And that is their profession. They know how to decipher these things. And so there's whole groups of them sitting and gathering this data and putting it in what you call the digitized form. Right? So here you can see different pipelines. The aim of the study is to develop a scalable pipeline to collect and digitize the data and so forth. And this is exactly what I've been doing as an astronomer. But now there are people who are now doing it for the clinical data. Okay, and then it falls into place as you go along. And here's other examples of this data. And so you can see how difficult it is going to be to do it. So we've seen that there are 666,000 people who have been affected by COVID in Pune so far. And this kind of data we have for 2,000 people. Okay, but it has been extended to about 6,000 people now because of the great difficulty in collecting and curating and digitizing the data. But even that becomes a great source of information. So then here is another kind of data. So this is the kind of report that you get from a PAT lab. Right, so because those people, they have digitized the thing and the report comes out in a nice PDF file. Except that we don't have access to the original PDF file. So what we have got access is to the scans of the PDF file. But the fact that the data is in this very regular form, okay, means that the AI people can work on it. So we have hired an AI company which looks at this thing. It looks at an image of a PDF file and then it reads it, understands how to do it and translates it to a digitized form. That's much more doable than deciphering the handwritten data. So I just want to show you a couple of pictures here as to how the data can be useful. Right, so you see that this is a 7-day rolling mean, meaning that you average over 7 days. And why 7 days? That is because everything changes on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, and then Monday, you will suddenly find, oh my God, COVID has gone down, happy. Tuesday is back up there, you see. So that is because the data is collected in different ways on different days. So you have to average it over 7 days. If you average it over 5 days, it doesn't work properly. Okay, so then here you have got here, on the left-hand side, you have got the number of tests which are conducted. And on the right-hand side, you have got the positivity rate. And you see that the positivity rate can go up as high as 40%, which means that practically every person who is being tested actually has got COVID. Okay, and who are the people who are tested? The people who have symptoms, and then their close contacts, and their slightly distant contacts. And what the attempt has to be, is to reduce the positivity rate to less than 5%. Because if it goes to less than 5%, it means that there are not enough people within society to make it a pandemic. Like, I mean, I can explain this to you better later, but I'm just quoting figures here. Right, so, and here is something which is another very important statistic. On the left-hand side, the number of cases detected have been plotted. On the right-hand side is you have got something called the case fatality rate. So what's the case fatality rate? Is that what is the fraction of people who have been detected as positive die? And you'll see that the case fatality rate here is 2%, 4%, 6%, 8%, like that. Right? And so why is case fatality, why it is difficult to get this number? That is because you can say what the case fatality rate is today, but people who may die today could have been admitted over a 15-day period in the past. Right? So you require a lot of clever methods to tag that. And secondly, why do we need this number? That is because there's another number which is called infection fatality rate. So what is case fatality rate? It is, take the number of people who died and then the number of people who are detected as positive. Right? But then, as I told you already, for every positive person, there are people who are positive but who are not detected. Right? They are asymptomatic people. Right? And so you've got something called the infection fatality rate, which is more or less the same all over the world. Doesn't matter. You can do this out. Yeah, okay. So which is more or less same all over the world. It changes a little bit depending upon how good are your hospitals and so on. And the infection fatality rate is there. Now if a case fatality rate goes up, then it means that there are a lot of undetected cases in the thing. So how do we use this information? And so you see here, this is the city of Pune, and it has been divided into wards. Okay, so, and then they are called prabhags, which are sub-wards. And then this kind of a diagram tells you how is the disease progressing over a period of time. So on the left, it's at the earlier date. On the right, it is September 2020. And the different colors means different prevalence of the infection. Right, so now here in the next one, you can see the prevalence of the case fatality rate. So what happens is that if the case fatality rate in some places is unusually high, it would mean, from using the kind of arguments that I gave before, it would mean that the number of people who are undetected but who are COVID positive is very high. Okay, because they're all there, but you're not detecting them. And that is why of the people that you detect, many seem to be dying. Right, so therefore, then we actually used to provide this statistic to the Pune Municipal Corporation and then say that, look, in this particular sub-ward, the case fatality rate is too high, so please go and increase the testing there, because there are a number of people who are asymptomatic and whom you have not detected. Right, so that is the kind of thing where the data is dynamic, it has to be used, you make these plots every day, and then you have to go and telling people here. So this is my last slide, which shows that I already talked about disease surveillance, and then there is the environmental surveillance, and then there's the data curation and analysis. And then our teams have been engaged in all this. You see, the PKC itself has no facilities at all. I mean, we have got a few rooms where we sit, but so all our activities are dependent on getting partner institutions and partner industries to work with us. Right, so we work together, divide out the work, and then we facilitate the work being done. And then we get grants. We have got very substantial grants for COVID-related data from the Rockefeller Foundation, and then Hindustan Unilever. So we get grants from different organizations. And the aim is going to be to release all the COVID data as a major database, and then try to incorporate other infectious diseases into it. And then try to scale this up to different cities and countrywide. So again, all these efforts have been made internationally. And because there the hospitals are better equipped and the data gathering is better equipped, it is much easier to do it there. But it's still very important for us to do it because the circumstances vary from geographic location to geographic location. You'll always see things start in Delhi, things start in Pune. They have large numbers in Kerala. And all the other places where you feel that there's going to be lots and lots of patients, they're really not there. When, for example, the Kumbh Mela took place. So we thought that the whole of UP is going to go up, but it didn't happen. So it's extremely important to gather data in situ and to do the analysis in situ and then to compare it with what happens in other places. So this is yet another example of data. Right? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. I request Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, for the presidential address. Over to PC, sir.
Dr. Ajit Kambabi, whom I know since 1991, who has given a very brilliant exposition of how data can be curated, managed from unstructured data, structures can be created, and how ultimately they can contribute to enhancing the quality of life and life management systems by way of the COVID thing. Of course, even though we were all knowing about this work, this forum gave us an opportunity to understand this brilliant work of effective research, not research data management, data management for enhancing the quality of life and life management systems. Of course, he mentioned about the other astronomical data, for example, how data can be finally just to find out new planets and other bodies, extraterrestrial bodies, and also new instrumentation can be developed based on that. So from raw data coming to experiments and all that. And then, but of course, when we think about data and all that, we will think it is only the experimental data which we are gathering from laboratories and all that, nothing like that. For example, when I see something, I get a data. When I hear something, it's a data. When I touch something, it is data. Of course, All the other instruments are probably secondary instruments for just getting these fields. So data, it is, of course, the size of data also, Dr. Kambavi mentioned. Thank you very much, Professor Ajit Kambavi, for accepting our invitation and giving us probably the real importance of the research data management in a very focused perspective. I am sure that this data will be published and will be available to the whole world for important. And I am extremely glad that the Library Technology Conclave gave us an opportunity to hear this very fascinating lecture of a clear illustration of the research data management. I don't want to make a speech on presidential address or anything. Of course, I welcome Professor Ajit Kambavi to the campus. He said it's his first visit, but it was really wonderful to have you, Professor Ajit Kambavi, with us today. And Dr. Jagdish Arora, of course, we all worked together in similar institutions. I was also part of the IUCA governing body as part of the UGC thing. Then our Yashpal was the chairman of the governing body at that time. I was also in the IUCA body, and of course, similarly within Flipnet also, I had occasion to be on the board. I had occasion to meet Jagdish Arora also personally and professionally at different levels. We are all extremely glad that you are all here. Professor Shalini Ars, again, long-term colleague of mine, worked in different institutions, and she's the program chair. Again, as president and head of this institution, I take this opportunity to congratulate the efforts taken by you in institutionalizing the Library Technology Conclave and the research data management in a very significant way. Mr. Satyanarayana, I know him from my days in National Assessment and Accreditation Council. I have also attended these conferences. Of course, I am not a data analytic expert or library expert, but I have been seeing how efficiently informatics have been interacting and collaborating with the library professional and data professional and academic institutions in the country to give a very necessary dimension for strengthening the data in all perspectives. I'm extremely glad that we are collaborating with you for this conference. Dr. Hindurao Vedanta, he's new to this institution, but he has done, and his colleagues in the library and all my colleagues, they have worked incessantly for making this particular conclave in a very, give it a very good success. Let me congratulate him with limited professional support. He could do it, and let me congratulate and appreciate the efforts taken by Dr. Hindurao Vedante and all his team. They're all here for this. I'm also glad that good number of international experts, global experts are here to be for the workshop. Of course, morning I had just witnessed for a few minutes. Of course, I am going to probably attend some of these sessions. I think it's very extremely gratifying to note that they have all taken it very seriously, and then this library technology conclave is going to make an impact in the academic life of the campus. I'm extremely glad about it. I don't want to make a speech or anything. Of course, when I started research in 1969, the largest database which I could imagine was the chemical abstracts. Chemical abstract. All librarians know about chemical abstracts. So that was the first thing. So from that chemical abstract data, 52 issues every year, and even now, in terms of printed data, it is probably the largest scientific research database. So that from that, we are trying to extract those abstracts and find out what could be a new area of research. That was the only thing. And then, of course, now we have seen what is the size of data. It is when we talk about research data or it is not just scientific research data only. For example, there is lot of knowledge and skills, and skills available with the ordinary people. We talked about public science and that citizen-centric science. For example, we are all from the universities or academic institutions, but the knowledge and skills which we have gathered from academic institutions is definitely there. But if you just look at the knowledge and skills available with the ordinary people in the country, it would be several million or trillion times that of the knowledge which you have. And they are also data. So he mentioned about the size of the data. Of course, I do not know, I didn't understand what exactly it is, but I have also seen that about by 2025, 500 exabytes, that is 500 million gigabytes of data each day will be generated by 2025. That is the estimate. So how to analyze this? For example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these things are going to do a great deal of probably understanding, converting the unstructured data into structured data and making use out of it. And I am glad that this particular conclave is happening in a significant way. And it is also very important that the research data management has to happen in a systematic way. Professor Shalini has mentioned about the STIP 2020, how research data management policies, programs and practices can be developed. And also in the STIP policy, they mention about making the data. I just say data, making the data available or data made by government, public institutions. When I say public institution, private institutions are also public institutions in the sense that they are also serving the public cause and they are also from the public tax and payment of fees and all that. So this data should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. What is it? They use a fair. So, but this should go to the classroom. This should go to the researchers. For example, from the data of the COVID-19 analysis, Professor Ajit Kambav here mentioned, how much one can learn? What type of, for example, in the epidemic analysis. So a lot of things can be learned. Of course, they have also protein sequence. And during the COVID period, we have also seen how data management has happened in a very revolutionary way during the COVID situation. For example, it was in August, after 4 months of this COVID thing, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, we invited Dr. Kasturi Rangan in a virtual conference, and all the academy presidents were there. What will happen to experimental science? Nothing. Laboratories are closed. Research scholars cannot go to the laboratory. Instruments are rusting. So we are all we are chemists, scientists. We are all just wondering what is going to happen. Then later, after 6 months, we saw that probably it was the year of science. Maximum collaboration, maximum data were analyzed, and we got medicines. He mentioned it earlier. We got vaccine in record time. In the history of human civilization, such a rapid thing. That is also a clear case of data management, available data management. People from maybe a village in Uttar Pradesh and a city in UK or city in, they all collaborated through such data management. So we see immense potentials of effective research data management for enhancing our capabilities. And of course, as mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence, machine learning, we can convert the unstructured data into structured data and then lead to discoveries and all that. Of course, you know about the Fourth Paradigm Institute under the original aeronautical laboratories. It was National Aeronautical Laboratories. There is a Fourth Paradigm Institute for how from raw research, raw data, new science, new knowledge can be generated. I am extremely glad that this conference is happening in a very significant way. This is only the inaugural session. We had two workshops already over. Let me congratulate each and every one of you, the organizers, as well as the participants here across the world who is attending online, for taking this activity forward. And once again, on behalf of the university and Somaiya Vidya Vihar University and Somaiya Vidya Vihar institutions, let me appreciate the efforts taken by each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for the presidential address as well as the appreciations. Now we take this opportunity to felicitate our wonderful speakers. We are privileged to have Dr. Ajit Kembhavi, sir, as our keynote speaker. I request VC, sir, to felicitate him with memento as token of our affection. Thank you, sir. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Jagdish Arora, sir, as guest with us for this function. I request VC, sir, to felicitate him with memento as token of our affection. Thank you. We had two workshops on research data management today on day one. The first resource person of the day was Ms. Robin Rice, data librarian and head of research data support information services, University of Edinburgh, UK. I request Ms. Robin Rice to come up on the stage and accept our felicitation. I request Professor Shalini Aras to felicitate her with memento as token of our affection. Thank you. Now I request the second resource person, Professor Kevin Croston, to come up on the stage and accept our felicitation. I request Professor Shalini Aras to felicitate him with memento as token of our affection. Professor Kevin Croston is Associate Dean, Research Distinguished Professor, Information Science, School of Information Studies, Syracuse University, USA. On behalf of Department of Library Science, Somaiya Vidya Vihar University, I am here to present vote of thanks. Our heartfelt thanks to Ms. Robin Rice for the wonderful presentation of Workshop 1. All the way from Edinburgh, UK, you traveled here for this program, ma'am. Thank you so much. Our sincere thanks to Professor Kevin Croston for the descriptive and an informational presentation of Workshop 2. Thanks for coming here right from Syracuse University, USA. Thank you so much. We take this opportunity to thank Dr. Ajit Kembhavi, sir, for accepting our invitation and the wonderful keynote address. Thank you so much, sir. We sincerely thank Dr. Jagdish Arora, sir, for being with us and for delivering a very informative inaugural address. Our Somaiya management is always supportive for all continuing education programs. Thanks a lot. Our VC, sir, was keen for happening of this conclave. He was instrumental in getting it done. Our heartfelt thanks to you, sir. Thank you so much, Team Informatics, for opting our Somaiya University campus for the 6th conclave. Thank you so much. Our sincere thanks to Shalini Madam for supporting, for the support in planning and executing of each and every event of this conclave. Thank you so much, Professor Shalini Aras. Thanks a lot, all resource persons, panelists, anchors of all sessions to be held on second and third day of this conclave. We thank Dr. Monika Khanna, Director, Somaya Institute of Management, KJSIM, and her team for making the auditorium and lab available for this conclave. A big thank to their staff for their enthusiastic support. We thank Muskan Madam and her public relations, that is PR team, for their assistance in conclave. Thank you so much, Muskan Ma'am and team. Thank you so much, Mr. Mahavir and his team from Data Center. Without their unconditional support, that is IT support, nothing could have been done. Nothing could have been moved ahead. Thank you so much. Our sincere thanks to all heads of Somaya institutions. Thanks a lot to you all. Last but not the least, our sincere thanks to all wonderful participants. And thanks to everyone who has helped for occurrence of this conclave. Thank you so much. Now with permission of VC sir, I hereby announce the conclusion of this inaugural function.